This is Dr. David Black, founding director of the American Mindfulness Research Association and associate professor at the Keck Medical School of the University of Southern California. I speak with guest Dr. Samuel Wong, professor and director of the School of Public Health and Primary Care at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. He is head of the Division of Family Medicine and Primary Healthcare. In 2018, he founded, with a gift from a major donor, the Thomas Jing Center for Mindfulness Research and Training, where he currently serves as director. His research focuses on the use of mindfulness interventions in the primary care setting. He has authorship on over 250 research articles, many in leading research and medical journals. Welcome, Dr. Wong.
Hello, David.
So I'm excited to talk to you today. Primary care has been on my mind for many years about a possible solution for merging mindfulness practices with a broad patient base. You are an expert in primary care and family medicine. Why don't you talk about a little bit about what primary care services your center offers, and what are the primary care needs in Hong Kong?
Yes. In Hong Kong, we are also facing an aging population. So more and more people suffer from chronic diseases. And many of these people usually will come to the public settings for their primary care services. So these are the older people, maybe from a lower socioeconomic backgrounds and with multiple chronic diseases. So what we offer, the center offers, is training for primary care doctors in mindfulness, as well as providing some services for these people in the primary care settings. We also provide some online short sessions every weekend, such that people can get a taste of mindfulness, especially during the COVID time. And we do provide some of the mindfulness training at one of the primary care centers during lunchtime, and also during some of the outside office hours, such that people can access it with more convenience.
Are these common set programs where anyone under this umbrella of care services can attend, or is it selective? You have to have been on a list. How do you work with the population?
Yeah, because right now mindfulness is not provided for free in Hong Kong, unlike some other countries like the UK. So people need to join something called the multi-mobility primary care program, and after they join it, which is the fundings come from a donation, so that after they join it and they get referred by the primary care doctors, then they can join this mindfulness training. We also modify the mindfulness training to be similar to the mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, but with shorter sessions and also with a shorter practice time, such that they can ease into practicing meditation.
So in this, do you have a referral system in place? Because I'm thinking back to, there are current referral systems at my previous university, various centers and institutes and divisions would say, hey, we have this program. It's a mindfulness center. It's associated with the university. You might want to look into it. There is also more formal, some people have more formal systems where it's as soon as we identify like a sub-threshold ailment or a clinical ailment, I think it's a good referral program, and then a direct referral can be made. What does your program look like in that way?
Yeah, we more work towards educating and informing the primary care providers within our cluster, such that we send people sometimes to the clinics to promote, and either the patients can call or the primary care providers can give the patient information to our staff. So this in a way is not formally integrated into the public system yet, and it's more towards a sort of a more more referral within the local cluster. So these are the provision which is for free. But if you are going to be able to pay a small amount of money, then they can directly call the center when there are courses starting enrollment.
And so this broader center, you're referring to this Thomas Jing Center for Mindfulness Research and Training. It's such an amazing thing to have, like a donor-originated center. Was there a culture shift around this? Like, how did that come into being since you were a part of that? It's relatively recent. It seems very impressive. And a lot of people would be interested in, like, how do you get something like that to happen?
It was actually by chance for the initial donation. The donor is a businessman, and he wanted to do something meaningful. And he enjoyed meditation. He thinks that I can help a lot of people. And so we find a location which was previously also a mindfulness center, but is not is a center only for training, but not so much for services. So we used the same site. We actually took over the same physical space and then turn it into more of a center which is funded by the university and also provide some of the services and conduct some of the research to evaluate the services as well. So the center has three parts of things that we do. The first part is provide training in, for example, MBCT. We have training for cancer patients previously, for My Mind, which is for ADHD and ASD, and also mindful parenting. And so we're going to have more training in the coming years, working with the Oxford Mindfulness Center when they send some of the staff over to Hong Kong to provide some training for health professionals, training for the MBCT for life. So training is part of that. And then we also provide the services regularly such that people can enroll with a reduced fee, and also providing some online mindfulness training as well. And also conduct some of the research together with some funding from the government. For example, we are running a program on mindfulness for older adults with loneliness, as we think that during the COVID time, a lot of the older adults, at least in Hong Kong, are not encouraged to go out because as to reduce the risk of getting COVID. So they stay at home and they become quite lonely. And also, we believe that older adults is a good time for these some things because they are in at the time of their life where they encounter loss. Some of them with grief and some of them with family conflicts, etc. So we look into topical things that we can try out mindfulness to see whether they work for these people with a funding from either research bodies or from the donation.
So those are a lot of programs. That's a lot to take on. How do you, because it's such an important piece, the training element. So the research is evident. We'll get to that. Your group has done a lot of great research. The training piece, it seems like in a way you are noting who healthcare workers are already available in the system and training them, or are you identifying new people to come in and function as healthcare service providers, or like a hybrid model? Like, how do you make that sustainable?
Yes. We actually have a hybrid program. For those people who have been trained, there's a few hundred of trained mindfulness teacher in Hong Kong. Those people will be interested in things like, for example, we're organizing a trauma-sensitive mindfulness workshops for them, or some more specialized area after they get a foundation training in mindfulness-based cognitive therapy or mindfulness-based stress reduction program. We are also training for newcomers. So these people, for example, the Oxford program are mainly for people who have enrolled in the MBSR or MBCT, but they want to teach to the general public. So These people will enroll in the 4 modules foundational training over a year with some supervision afterwards, such that they can provide the standardized program with review and supervision. So there are 2 types of program. And the funding, we thank donors for continuing support. And some of these programs, for example, training for health professionals, sometimes we do they do have to have a training fees, but these are usually subsidized as well from the donations. So that's the direction for us.
And are the trainees typically excited to stay with the program for longevity reasons? So they like this as part of their career orientation towards healthcare delivery? Does it add something to their career? Do they tend to like it in that way?
Yeah, some people actually, after they've been trained for the foundation course, they just cannot leave mindfulness. They become so passionate about it. And they want to integrate some part of the work towards it. For example, previously, one of my PhD students was working with Michael Krasner, Mindful Practice. And he came to Hong Kong like 5 to 6 years ago, and then he trained some healthcare professionals who subsequently did a randomized control trial to recruit healthcare professionals from the public sector to enroll in an 8 weeks course of the mindful practice. So, but these kind of programs, which is more, which is sort of modified from the original MBSR or MBCT, these usually are catered for people who have received the foundational training, who want to do more or want to specialize in certain areas, or for the to enrich their career. So Hong Kong runs a 2-tier system. So some of these people might work in non-governmental organization where they continue to provide mindfulness training for their specific populations, while some of these are private practitioners where they can provide the mindfulness training for various different populations. Some of them integrate mindfulness into their clinical work. So these people, they might run some group sessions, and some of them just use it in individual sessions as part of the counseling or psychological sessions with the patient. So it really depends on what the trainees want to do with what they've learned to further develop. But I found that there are quite a big group of people who are very interested in various subsequent training with more specialized areas. I think recently one of the more area that people find it interesting is the trauma-sensitive mindfulness training, and because of that, we also got recent funding from the government to conduct mindfulness training for people with post-traumatic stress disorder or post-traumatic stress symptoms, especially with the COVID, but so that we'll have some more training in this aspect before we start the clinical study.
And I mean, this sounds like a large program with a lot of buy-in.
It's also difficult because this population may be more sensitive to some of the, some of the components within the mindfulness training. So we want to be prepared before we start.
That's a good point. And leading back to what I was asking at the start, I wondered, do you have a personal opinion on primary care? So this is something I'm very interested in, and there seems to be a linkage here. There's a center. You wear 2 hats. Is primary care an essential place for a workforce that knows these mindfulness practices and can help people with them? Or do referrals need to be made elsewhere? Can we make a system where when people come to seek out healthcare for a variety of reasons, primary care is that place where mindfulness can help many people? Because I've always considered like the bigger public health implications of what we're trying to do here in a world of studying mindfulness. Like, how could we bring this to more people in a way that's digestible?
I agree. I think the primary care is the way to increase the reach of or accessibility of mindfulness training. Currently, the barriers is a bit of the first of all, it's the setting. You need the space for that to provide the training, and also part of the challenge is to integrate mindfulness training as part of the bigger system in the public system. But in Hong Kong, we do have a very long waiting time, even to see a psychiatrist. Sometimes it takes 1 to 2 years. So how do we make the orientation towards more of a preventive approach? For example, we conducted studies looking into the patients or people with subthreshold depression. So these are the people, if you're scoring for PHQ-9, that would be from 6 to 10 score. And we look at them and realize that within 1 year, the incidence is about 12 to 20% that they would develop major depression. So we recruited people and combined a course called the Behavioral Activations with some mindfulness skills. So make it very simple for people to learn about it, so that we train some nurses and social workers to run that. And we found that the incidence could be half by 50% if these people receive the care. So I think there's several challenges that we need to deal with before it can be used in primary care settings. And one of the things is to have the availability of training that is acceptable, that is implementable on a wider scale. And the second thing is for healthcare providers to be comfortable with it and to learn it themselves with some introduction and education, and also for patients to ask about it when they need it. So one of the constraints that we found is sometimes it's the physical space that we require. Especially for a small place like Hong Kong, where space is very limited, we often need to find various venues to run the programs. We run more than various programs or more than one program at one time. So now we're exploring the online platform, although this also have some problems because some of the older adults, they do worry about the cost associated with running a two-hour program each time. And also at home, they might be very crowded and they might not have the, the space or the tranquility or the time or there will be some of the homes are quite noisy and they live with other family members. So these are some other issues that we need to think about when we provide this to more people. But I do believe that there's indeed interest in the general population and also interest from health professionals. So from a policy-wise, then we need to convince the policymakers to think that this is something that is a cost-effective way to provide the services. And I think the UK has done quite okay in terms of providing free mindfulness-based cognitive therapy if they're referring from primary care doctors or the GPs. Although I think that it also depends on the locality where the patients live to get whether they can get the referral easily or not. So these are some of the challenges, but also some of the things that I think we should work towards if we want to make mindfulness to be more reachable to the larger population.
And it seems so the program proper that you are using, MBSR,
MBCT,
and MBCT, this model, does it just carry over perfectly in the cultural context of where you are in Hong Kong? Do you find with older adults you need adaptations, or are you newly running across or uncovering new issues? Are there like barriers, cultural barriers? Is there new different language that needs to be used when approaching these issues? What have you found?
It's actually quite interesting. We initially worried that the older adults, they might not get used to it, they might have problems. But we actually found that they are very good in terms of learning it. I'm not sure it's because many of them are retired, they have more time to practice. The only thing we change is the practice time. That in the original MBSR and MBCT, they require or they recommend to practice 45 minutes a day. But we only require them to practice 15 minutes a day. And each session lasts about 2 hours. And that's probably the only change we have. But we found that they learn it quite well. In our randomized controlled trial study, which was recently published, although we just compared to weighted control, we found that they have improvement in the well-being and some reduction on the depressive symptoms on healthy older adults population. So they seem to learn quite well. It's quite implementable among them. Although, as contrary to other beliefs, we did not find much improvement in the cognitive function. Although in the second study that we are actually recruiting right now, we are doing exploring the effects of mindfulness-based cognitive therapy for older adults with loneliness, and to see whether during this COVID time that mindfulness can be one of the ways for them to to change or actually to decenter them from the loneliness, subjective loneliness feelings.
Are these online live group meetings, or is it pre-recordings? What is your approach at the center?
It's actually for this study, it is live, but they are face-to-face for the adults. So all the older adults are face-to-face. The only online that we're currently doing are the one that we provide just hourly, just 1 hour sessions every Saturday and sometimes Wednesday night for the general public. So they can just enroll on Zoom. And these are also live sessions. So we actually do not have recorded or application sessions on iPhone. We haven't provided. So all of our sessions are live. And which leaves some space for them to ask questions if they have any problems within when they're practicing mindfulness.
And so fitting this within the broader culture, so currently in the States, we saw a transition from what you might call a hype to a medicalization to a degree, to a dissemination, which a lot of programs said, okay, no, it is something of real value and interest. There's still a lot of medical centers are definitely aware. I ran a national study with some colleagues to see how many mindfulness training and mind-body training centers there are. So I think the culture from the level of at least some integration with mainstream medical services, it has gotten that far and perhaps past the hype. We've gotten past what we might call like the media bubble and maybe too much attention. And now like the research is stabilizing, doing important trials and trying to uncover like how usable is this? And I know usability when I have like a family member who I've never really talked about mindfulness come around to me and be like, oh, I've been doing this mindfulness app for the past year. It really helped me with my anxiety. I can't believe you do this stuff. It's so cool. And so when it goes that far and like family members and friends and people who you never think would be finding this interesting are really telling you how it's changing their lives, there's an artifact of a broader culture at work, I think, as it makes its way into our families in different ways. What do you see in Hong Kong and more broadly? What is the cultural process that's been happening around the concept of mindfulness and maybe as applied in medicine?
Yeah, I think Hong Kong also has a lot of the Western influence on a lot of some of the mindfulness program, but I don't think we have gone as far as mindfulness as people said it. I think because I'm not sure Is it because some of that, many of the more popularized mindfulness, some of them through some of the larger corporations, or a lot of the private companies are providing it, and there are a lot of some of that is from various media, etc. In Hong Kong, the mindfulness movement is mainly starting with I think health professionals, but we have a long history of using meditation in some of the culture or some of the Buddhism, monastery, etc. So it is not very new for us, for one thing. The more new things for us is more of the medical aspects of that. But when people know mindfulness, they will know what they will not treat it as very novel in the sense that it is totally new for them. Because many people will have some exposure to meditation, at least in I guess in traditional Chinese Buddhism, or to other, more, even in Taoism, I think there's some meditation. So I think in our culture, people are not really new to the idea of meditation. So the new things is really how you might apply the mindfulness skills in some of the healthcare or the psychological issues or improvement for example, depression, etc. How do we use it in the medical settings, which is the newer aspect. In our private corporation, I don't think we got as much of a hype as that from similar to the US. Although people do use various apps in Hong Kong, I think I'm not sure is it because of the language. I'm yet to find one of the NGO in Hong Kong has an applications for meditations using an apps. But we have much fewer apps in Cantonese and Chinese language compared to the West. So that might be one of the reasons that the hype is less so in Hong Kong compared to the US. And our government hasn't picked up on it neither, unlike the UK. I think the UK government, the Parliament has picked up because of Dr. John Kabat-Zinn going there and etc. and all that.
I was imagining the potential of one of the barriers being the language issue. And I wanted to get your take on that. So who has been translating all the materials? How many languages is your group translating these materials from? I mean, someone had to do the legwork, right?
Yes.
Or is it in real time? I mean, have you created like a manual in various languages?
Oh, we actually already have it in Chinese Cantonese. Dr. Helen Ma, she was a PhD student under John Teasdale many years ago, and she actually brought mindfulness to Hong Kong in the 90s, I believe. And she actually trained many of the psychologists back then, and because of the foundational training initially with the Oxford group, we have all translated. All students or trainees have all translated it, and now we have more of a standardized translated materials in Chinese for us to use to our patients. So we actually have scripts in terms of meditation scripts, session by session, formalized, rundown, all in our language. Although in our health professionals, they all speak English. So in Hong Kong, it's a sort of a mix. So when we have invited overseas teachers to come, they will teach in English. But then some key people will translate them and they will share around. So that's how, and then we have a file on each of the programs. And it's very easily accessible for people who want to use it.
That's great. So your center is addressing all the translational elements, especially because you are targeting the older adult group.
Yes.
Maybe new parents is there some preference for English in some groups depending on the age, or What do you see as the preference? Yeah.
In Hong Kong, the preference, I guess, will be 80% will be 8 to 9% will prefer in Cantonese. There's maybe 5 to 10% will be want to use in English. So the English class will be much less compared. But we do have several English teachers in Hong Kong, and so they provide, for example, they provide some of the training for teachers in international schools, and they do run MBSR for the general public privately. But I would say the majority of people that we see, at least in the primary care settings, they would prefer Cantonese as the medium of instruction. So I would say we're going to run the course. Probably 9 out of 10 would prefer the Cantonese. And we so far have not run any Mandarin courses, but I know that they do run it in Beijing and in several places in mainland. So I do have meetings with the people who organize the course in Beijing on a regular basis. So we chatted on our training program. We share about what's going on, and I believe they ran a conference a few years ago before COVID, and now everything is online. I guess people are now more relaxed and they get used to COVID. So hopefully there will be more interaction in the coming future.
And in your work, it seemed that you do something interesting. If we turn to the research world, you have focused, in at least some of your work in the last couple of years, you're combining elements, of CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and adding mindfulness content to that. So this kind of diverges from some thinking about this, which would be that cognitive behavioral therapies are like a third wave type therapy. The recognition of connections between cognition, emotion, behavior, helping people recognize that, understand what their vulnerabilities are, recognize the thought process in their mind and how that's driving them to do things. And then, a new wave of therapy, some have argued, is like the mindfulness training therapies. You are non-evaluative, non-judgmental. You observe those same processes, so they're occurring in the mind. You could do the emotion, cognition, behavioral linkage, but the practice here is not to do that, because you're not trying to dive in to change these things, to alter relationships to your thinking and emotions, although over time that probably also happens. So in one way, it was like, here's a lineage perspective of different tools. But you, according to your approach, in some papers, it seems like, well, behavioral activation being a target, we'll infuse CBT with mindfulness elements. So do you want to talk about how you conceptualize those,
Yes.
the importance of that bridge in your work?
They appear to be quite different entity when you look at from the outside. But I think it's a bit of more how you do it. If you have let's say if you just do CBT, that would be more of, a discovery of the cognitive processes. And then in the traditional CBT way, you challenge the thoughts, right? You challenge and you tell them to find the evidence to refute, the thought process and discover and those sort of things. Mindfulness is sort of like a tool to facilitate the discovery in a more natural way, I would say. So instead of, doing it more, I guess CBT is also not very didactic in a way if you can do it, if the patients are accepting to it. But mindfulness could sort of give you a space to further explore that and to discover that with more ease, I would say. But I think in the end, you're still trying to see that, this first of all is not permanent. So your thoughts are not permanent. It doesn't define you, and thoughts are not facts. So it's still a discovery of what the true cognitive processes are, and just realize that you're not enmeshed with your your emotion match with your thoughts, etc. So, and that's you can find ways to, or actually you actually give a space to hold what is there, and then in a bit of a way to move on, such that you do not become your thoughts, or you do not ruminate on it. So I think in the outcomes is similar. Just the way to do it. I have to say that the reason we provide both is because I find it's not sort of like a not black and white sort of kind of a way. Some people prefer. I find some people, like especially people in Hong Kong, very very busy. They want things quickly. You can give them a session, but sometimes with some instruction, sometimes with some facilitations, with some structure to the program, might help them to anchor it better. Because if you make it all free floating, sometimes they get lost a little bit. So sometimes it needs a little bit of instruction. So it's a piece of an art, I would say, when you're being a facilitator, and you really need to pay attention to the individuals and see what you can facilitate and bring out from the individuals, because each class will be different. So that's it's sort of dance in a way that you facilitate them to bring out, to help them realize the cognitive processes involved, and what perpetuates could be the depressive symptoms, etc. So initially, when I combine behavior activation with mindfulness, it seems to be very two distinct things. It's quite hard because behavior activation, you schedule activities, you sort of push them a little bit, right? It's quite different from the mindfulness concept. It's almost like opposite. But when we talk to the patient, they don't find it to be too different. And in fact, when you schedule activities and when they found that they could not do it, the mindfulness helped them to cultivate a sort of accepting ways for the previously perceived to be failures to be more accepting of the imperfections of life, I would say. So I guess sometimes sometimes these challenges provide opportunities for them to learn and to grow during classes. But we're still exploring various ways to do it. My latest thinking is to mix mindfulness with physical activity, because that is also part of the mental well-being and part of the public health. One of the things that we do, and so how can we, do some well-being program, which not just with mindfulness, but with various components. In the MBCD for Life, I believe they from Oxford, they also integrate gratitude within it. So because some research showing that if you write down on something that you're grateful for, that might improve your mental well-being. Some other things like that. Like altruistic acts, behaviors that have been shown to work for some people to improve their well-being. So I think there are various ways you can do it. But one way that we should be careful is not to make it like, everything is just add mindfulness to it. So sometimes it's the theoretical thinking and the training and etc. and really testing in research is what I think is important before we use it on a larger population. Yeah. And to study the potential adverse events, which I guess previous trial we rarely study that. And it seems that there are some new scales that you can use to see whether, to see whether people find discomfort and whether these are only temporary, etc. So I think that's a huge new domain of evaluation research that we can conduct in this area.
And so your work went on to be published in important medical journals, which, the field, even though it had its moments of being in medical journals, I think many of us wondered, how can we land good papers in mainstream medical journals? And this has been a success story of you and others your depression work, going into Annals of Family Medicine, International Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry for when you're working with older adults to target well-being and cognitive function. And some of your recent work is working with families and kids. So this is an important area. Primary care, you may see parents and their kids and having different challenges. Here you've been working with adolescents, parents, and focusing on autism spectrum disorder. So it seems new. And so what are you finding there? Are you trying to help parents like manage these challenges? And anyway, are we working with these kids at all also, or is it mostly with the parents?
This is an interesting program. We actually, for quite a few years, we have invited Susan Bogos from the Netherlands to come and train the healthcare professionals in Hong Kong to provide a program called My Mind, which is for ADHD's 8-week program with 2 hours each time. And we provided training to both parents and the kids, so the children and the parents. And we provide them initially with ADHD, and then we ran a pilot. I think the study that you read is a pilot study. It's a randomized control, waitlist control trial on children with ASD. And this is a 9-week program. And for this program, we work with NGOs and non-governmental organizations because, and we provide training for both parents and the children because we believe. You are parents, David. You probably know this. How the parent behaves sometimes often have big impact on the children, right? So, but especially in Hong Kong, there's quite a lot of stigma around children with disability or special needs, and some of them, especially when they, if they are mildly affected, they might get a lot of stress from, in public areas, at schools, etc., because the teachers may not be as sensitive to the needs because of the big class. So we believe that both the children and the parents will need some support. And so we provide this, usually in these settings, we provide one group for parents. So there's 12 parents. And then we run, for example, with the children with ADHD, we run about 4 to 5 children per group. So one parent group will have 2 children groups or 3 children groups, depending on the numbers. And we find that in the ASD program, the sample size is quite small. But we find there's a trend towards improve in the anxiety levels compared to the control group. And for the ADHD, our study is almost complete. I think next year by March, we are comparing the My Mind with the MBC, with the CBT. And it seems that both groups improve in terms of with some of the psychological symptoms, but we will know the results next year because that is done by one of my PhD students, and that one may be more, maybe better because it's have a large sample size of 140, I think, 70 versus 70, and we've been running that for a few years because of the COVID, etc. So there's been a delay, so we'll see more how it goes. But for the parents, we separately, we also provide some mindful parenting for only for parents, because I believe research shown that the parents' behavior can predict the child behaviors after a while. So if you have a parent who is suffering from psychological symptoms or who have their own issues, likely the children will follow afterwards. So we believe that if we're going to intervene, then likely doing it as a family will be more useful.
And so you mentioned something about being a parent, and yes, I am. In our schools, I wanted to ask you about this. The other day, I got a picture from my school via email, and they're saying the children are meditating, and they're all laying down doing a body scan, and I'm laughing because my school knows nothing about how into mindfulness I am personally. there's another hint at what's happening culturally.
Wow.
And I was wondering, so that's in school, preschool level. And, we hear all kinds of stories here in the States of, middle school level and mindful pausing during the school period, et cetera. And not to say it happens everywhere, but you can kind of see where it's leaking into the various institutions of culture. Anything in the school system in Hong
I think
Kong?
formally not, but I know there's someone from another university who's starting a .B program, and they are training teachers I believe, in primary and also high schools. And in the research that I've read about is by another professor called Professor Lam. She showed that compared to Weighted control, I believe there's improvement in terms of the emotional regulation among school children. And I believe another researcher is starting on something even younger. I think in early primary school or even in kindergarten. But although we are behind, I believe in the US, you have been running a lot of programs. And I believe some of the programs you in the US have been running a self-compassion program in younger population. And I believe I read something by Richard Davidson on that quite a while back.
Yeah,
so
the socio-emotional learning paradigm seems strong. And of course, there are many states with many iterations and different preferences for teaching our kids. But yeah, I've seen that, I'm in Los Angeles, typically progressive about education. I'm, 13 hours flight from you, and, both in busy places, busybody people seeking out anxiety and stress management and help my children. So I think we have a lot in common about our population base who's seeking these programs out.
And I think California is a good place to do all these programs because you have such a nice environment.
It helps.
It's very conducive.
Well, it depends where you are in California. You could be sitting in traffic on the 110 freeway and think it's the worst place on earth, or you can be out in the mountains and enjoying yourself up in the sequoias. So yeah, a little bit of both. And so what are any new current projects or visions for projects? You mentioned some very behavioral projects and working with kids.
So the kids project with ADHD is completing next year, but we are running a loneliness project, also recruiting patients from primary care settings, and that will finish in about a year and a half. And then next year, we're starting the PTSD program, the post-traumatic stress disorder symptoms program with some of the NGOs, especially post-COVID for this program. And so those are the two new programs. And I just submitted another proposal on the use of mindfulness to see whether it can affect the COVID vaccination, etc. So, but that one will need to wait for a year to know whether it's get funded or not. So these are the programs that we are running. And also the training program next year that will be working towards providing foundational training for health professionals.
And part of the training are there master's level PhD students, MD trainees? Do you have that form of training program at the center? Or is it more focused on training of existing vocational professionals?
Yeah, it's more the existing vocational, although our school do run the PhD program. So if they want to do PhD in mindfulness, then they will probably work with me or another colleague who also, his interest is also in mindfulness. But there will be only 1 or 2 such students per year. But for the mindfulness vocational training, then that will have more trainees per year. That will be 35 per year or something like that. But that is totally learning about mindfulness rather than doing research with it. Although we work with a lot of the people, some of the psychologists in the community in many of our research to provide the intervention during these research studies. Yeah.
Wonderful. So let's conclude for today. Thank you very much, Dr. Wong. I appreciate your time. Our listeners can find our recordings at goamra.org. That's GOAMRA.org, where you can support us by becoming a member or subscriber. That's it for today.